In today's fast-paced, image-conscious society, people are often judged by their outward appearance rather than their true character or capabilities. This unfortunate reality is powerfully illustrated in the story of Margaret Maggie Collins, a humble yet wealthy philanthropist who was publicly humiliated for her casual appearance at a luxury car dealership. Maggie entered the dealership dressed in jeans and a plain white t-shirt, hoping to purchase a special car for her sister. Despite her polite demeanor and genuine interest in a high-end vehicle, she was dismissed and disrespected by the sales manager, Blake Thompson, who assumed she couldn't afford such a luxury based solely on how she looked. Blake's behavior represents a broader societal issue, the tendency to equate wealth, intelligence, or importance with how someone dresses or presents themselves. In his eyes, Maggie's worn sneakers and lack of designer labels meant she was not a serious customer. His condescending attitude and refusal to assist her not only showcased his personal biases, but also reflected a dangerous, superficial mindset shared by many. Instead of offering service based on her expressed interest, he made assumptions and attempted to steer her toward the used car section. What Blake and many others failed to realize is that true worth cannot be measured by appearance. Maggie, though dressed simply, is a woman of substance, success, and compassion. Her story is a stark reminder of how many people are unfairly underestimated or mistreated simply because they don't look the part. Judging others by their clothing or outward appearance not only limits opportunities, but can also cause emotional harm and perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Ultimately, Maggie's experience highlights the need for greater empathy, open-mindedness, and a re-evaluation of what success and value truly look like. Respect should never be reserved for those who appear wealthy, but extended to all, regardless of how they dress or what assumptions others may make. What most people at the dealership failed to recognize was the true identity of the woman they so quickly dismissed. Margaret Maggie Collins was not an ordinary customer wandering into a luxury showroom to daydream about unattainable cars. She was, in fact, the founder and heart behind the Collins Foundation, a highly respected organization dedicated to supporting children with disabilities. Through years of tireless work, she had built the foundation from the ground up, transforming the lives of thousands of families by funding specialized medical equipment, educational programs, and adaptive sports initiatives. Beyond her professional accomplishments, Maggie was also the wife of Alexander Collins, a tech billionaire who revolutionized renewable energy solutions. Together, they lived in quiet wealth, choosing simplicity over extravagance, not because they had to, but because they believed in staying grounded and connected to the people they served. Maggie's modest attire, jeans, a plain white t-shirt and scuffed sneakers, was a reflection of her values. She deliberately rejected the idea that wealth had to be flaunted or that respect had to be earned through luxury. Her life choices were rooted in humility and a desire to make the world more inclusive, especially for those often overlooked. Ironically, it was these very qualities that led others to underestimate her. The sales manager, blinded by superficial standards, assumed she didn't belong in a place filled with multi-million-dollar vehicles. He failed to see that Maggie not only had the financial means to purchase any car in the showroom, but also the moral integrity and compassion that most people aspire to. Maggie's story is a powerful reminder that true influence doesn't come from status symbols or extravagant displays of wealth. It comes from integrity, empathy, and a quiet strength that uplifts others. Her unassuming nature wasn't a sign of weakness or lack. It was evidence of a woman fully secure in who she was. In dismissing her, the dealership staff not only lost a valuable customer, but also an opportunity to recognize greatness in its most authentic form. Maggie didn't need to prove her worth. She lived it daily through her work and her values. Rather than reacting with anger or revenge, Maggie Collins and her husband Alexander chose to respond to her mistreatment at the luxury dealership with dignity, strategy, and purpose. After experiencing blatant discrimination based solely on her appearance, Maggie could have easily walked away and purchased a car elsewhere. However, instead of letting the incident pass unnoticed, she and Alexander saw an opportunity to turn a painful moment into a powerful lesson. Their response wasn't driven by pride or the need to prove their wealth. It was about shifting perspectives and exposing the dangers of snap judgments. Together, they crafted a plan not to shame or punish, but to enlighten. Alexander, a highly influential billionaire in the tech world, returned to the dealership the next day in a $1.2 million Rolls-Royce Phantom, dressed in a tailored suit that immediately commanded respect. He revealed his identity only after catching the attention of the very people who had disrespected his wife, including the arrogant sales manager Blake Thompson. By calmly stating that his wife was the woman turned away the day before, Alexander forced the staff, and the owner of the dealership, to confront the consequences of their bias. He made it clear that Maggie had been judged unfairly, not because of her behavior or financial status, but because of her choice to dress simply. More impressively, Alexander used his influence not to demand apologies or exact punishment, but to propose meaningful change. He insisted that Blake volunteer at the Collins Foundation's upcoming charity event, helping children with disabilities, as a way to gain a deeper understanding of humanity beyond material wealth. He also recommended unconscious bias training for the dealership staff, highlighting the importance of treating all customers with equal respect. This thoughtful response turned a moment of personal humiliation into a broader lesson on empathy, respect, and humility. Maggie and Alexander didn't just challenge the assumptions made about them. They challenged the system that allows those assumptions to flourish. In doing so, they reminded everyone watching that real change doesn't come from retaliation, but from education, awareness, and the courage to confront discrimination with purpose and grace. Instead of choosing a path of revenge, Maggie and Alexander Collins opted for something far more impactful: education. After the discriminatory treatment Maggie faced at the luxury dealership, it would have been easy, and understandable, for the couple to respond with anger or even destroy the dealership's reputation using their influence and wealth. But Maggie's character and values did not align with retaliation. She wasn't interested in humiliating the sales manager, Blake Thompson, or seeking public vindication. What she wanted was something deeper: an opportunity for reflection, growth, and awareness. Together with her husband, Maggie devised a response that would challenge the dealership's assumptions and force them to see the consequences of their prejudice without aggression or hostility. The heart of their approach lay in a simple yet profound idea: exposure to real human experiences. Alexander suggested that Blake, the very man who had treated Maggie with such disdain, volunteer at the upcoming Collins Foundation benefit gala. But not as a guest or VIP. He would serve as a hands-on volunteer, helping children with disabilities, assisting with event setup, and engaging directly with the people Maggie's foundation served. It was a role designed not to shame, but to educate, to offer Blake the chance to step outside his comfort zone and witness firsthand the power of compassion and humility. This wasn't about punishing a man for his mistake. It was about giving him the chance to understand the world beyond his narrow judgments. Additionally, Alexander encouraged the dealership's owner to implement unconscious bias training for the staff, turning a single incident into an opportunity for company-wide change. By choosing to lead with grace and empathy, Maggie and Alexander set an example of how to use privilege for purpose. Their approach proved incredibly effective. Blake, who started as a reluctant volunteer, was gradually transformed by the experience, forming bonds with the children and re-evaluating his own values. The lesson was clear. Human worth is not defined by wealth, clothing, or appearances. In the end, it was not public shaming, but patient exposure to truth and empathy that brought about the most meaningful transformation. And that was the most powerful outcome of all. Blake Thompson's journey from arrogance to humility stands as one of the most powerful arcs in this story. a true testament to the possibility of redemption when someone is willing to reflect, grow, and change. Initially, Blake was the embodiment of elitism and shallow judgment. He prided himself on his ability to qualify customers based on appearance, and he dismissed Maggie Collins without a second thought, assuming her modest clothing reflected a lack of financial means or importance. But after being required to volunteer at the Collins Foundation's benefit gala, something shifted. What began as an obligation, a condition set by Alexander Collins to help Blake understand the consequences of his prejudice, soon evolved into a transformative experience. Working alongside children with disabilities, Blake was exposed to a world far removed from luxury cars and superficial impressions. He witnessed resilience, joy, and genuine human connection. These were people who didn't care about designer suits or expensive watches. They valued kindness, patience, and understanding. One young boy, Thomas, particularly impacted him. As Blake helped him navigate the event, he began to see the world through a different lens. The experience humbled him and dismantled the pride that once clouded his judgment. Blake didn't just go through the motions. He embraced the opportunity to learn. He continued volunteering after the gala, working closely with Daniel, the young salesman who had stood up for Maggie, and even took part in reshaping the dealership's customer service training. More importantly, Blake offered a heartfelt personal apology to Maggie, not out of fear or guilt, but out of true remorse and respect. His words, and more so his actions, reflected a man who had grown beyond his past biases. His transformation wasn't dramatic or exaggerated, it was authentic. Through consistent effort and self-reflection, he turned a moment of failure into a foundation for better character. Blake's story shows that redemption is not only possible, but powerful when it stems from sincerity and accountability. It wasn't wealth or influence that made him better, it was his willingness to listen, learn, and change. And in doing so, he regained not just respect from others, but a renewed sense of purpose within himself. Blake Thompson's sincere transformation did not go unnoticed. His journey from judgmental arrogance to genuine humility earned him something rare in today's world: a second chance. What made Blake's redemption so impactful was not just his change in behavior, but the heart behind it. He didn't just say the right things, he lived them. After volunteering at the Collins Foundation Benefit Gala, he continued to show up, not out of obligation, but out of a new sense of purpose. He built relationships with the children, supported his colleagues with integrity, and worked to help change the dealership's internal culture. Daniel, the young salesman who had shown kindness to Maggie when no one else did, became a peer he mentored and supported. For once, Blake's actions were driven not by ambition, but by a desire to make amends and do better. Seeing this change, Alexander Collins decided that Blake deserved an opportunity to prove himself professionally once again. While the Collins family had originally withheld a multi-million-dollar fleet purchase due to Blake's behavior, Alexander later surprised him with a chance to handle that very transaction, entrusting him with the corporate fleet sale. It was a clear message. Redemption, when earned through sincerity and growth, is worthy of recognition. Blake's shock and gratitude in that moment were genuine. He had not expected such trust, especially after the damage caused by his earlier prejudice, but he welcomed the responsibility with humility. This second chance was more than just a business opportunity, it was a reward for character. Maggie and Alexander didn't offer it out of pity or obligation, but because Blake had demonstrated real change. In doing so, they modeled what true leadership looks like, not only holding people accountable, but also lifting them when they rise above their past. Blake's journey reminds us that while mistakes can cost us dearly, growth can restore what was lost, and sometimes even more. His story is proof that when we embrace empathy, challenge our own biases, and commit to change, we open the door to not just redemption, but meaningful new beginnings. One of the most profound lessons from this story is that true worth lies not in outward appearances, but in character, compassion, and integrity. In a world where people are often judged by what they wear, what they own, or how they look, this story reminds us that kindness, humility, and respect should be offered to everyone, regardless of status. For older generations who have witnessed many seasons of life, this message resonates deeply. It is not material wealth that defines a person, but how they treat others, especially those they believe have nothing to offer in return. The story of Maggie Collins teaches us that quiet strength, lived values, and sincere intentions can create real impact. Her choice to respond to prejudice, not with anger, but with grace and wisdom, transformed not only a man's mindset, but also an entire workplace. It shows that second chances matter, not just for the person who failed, but for the community that benefits from their growth. As we age, we understand more clearly that dignity, empathy, and patience are among life's greatest treasures. And perhaps the most powerful act of all is to help others see the value in people they once overlooked.